Hello everyone, welcome to a new video. Today we are going to go through the best and worst reads I've had so far over 2023. I am going to do this with just the best and worst book of each month, and I have an idea to do a video about the 4.5 star ratings that I've given out and why they didn't quite hit 5 stars. I think that'd be kind of fun to do as well at a later date. But today we're going to start with the books that I've read so far this year that have been amazing and really leading the way through a great, fantastic time, and then the ones that have been either a letdown or just really changed the flow of the reading course from being amazing to not so great. I'm not going to go too far into like what the book's about because I do reading updates each month. I started it, I think, around March or May, one of them. I think it was an M month, and you can find them. I'll put the playlist in the description below and also in the iCards. So I'm just going to get straight into it because we've got a total of, let me think, we're on the month. There'll be 14 books to talk about, I think. So the first book is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. Oh my goodness, I cannot believe I just messed up saying my favourite book of the year. This is by Heather Fawcett. I read this as an ARC at the very start of the year, and I think this came out in February, if I'm correct. The next book's out in January, or maybe I read it in January and it was meant to be out in January. Anyway, it came out at the start of the year, and this book is currently my favourite book so far this year. I absolutely enjoy this book, and I didn't think I would because this has a unique style to it. It is not written like a normal book. It is journal entries pertaining to what Emily gets up to in her journey to discover more about the Fae. I really love cozy fantasy, and I can see why this setting and the characters and all that really vibed for me. So that is a huge factor into why I gave this 5 stars. I absolutely love banter in my books, and that is another huge factor for this one. The romance subplot is absolutely delightful. If you enjoy books like Howl's Moving Castle, Sorcery of Thorns, those kind of books where it's a subplot for the romance but it is so integral to the whole storyline, then you'll definitely love this. I really cannot wait for book 2, and we have a running joke, my friends and I, that if I get it as an ARC and read it this year, it could be the one to knock this off the top of the list. Wouldn't that be funny? I also think the only other book right now that could probably do it is A Curse for True Love by Stephanie Garber, which I obviously haven't read yet. It's out in October, so I'm not sure what could top this book, but that's the only one I can think of right now, or its sequel. So the bottom read for January was The Whispering Dark by Kelly Andrew. This was a book club read for the fantasy book club that I belong to, and I think this is one of the very few fantasy books that ended up in the bottom half. I did a little bit of stat work before I started this video regarding like whether or not the book was a fantasy or a romance, and yeah, I'm just checking the list now, and the only other book that's not a romance is a sci-fi, which will be coming up later in the video. But this one here is a case of the storyline is really, like, the concept is really good and it has great potential, but the execution was so poorly done that it didn't give the vibes that it wanted to. This book could have done with a huge edit. Like I said, I'm not going to get into the storylines and what it's all about. I do have videos on these. I don't think on these earlier ones, but I do have reviews if you want to check them out. But basically, I really did enjoy the concept, but just the execution was really off for me. And there was a lot of fixation on how frail the main character is. So I read this with my book club friends, and as you can see, I've only put 2 tabs in the book, and normally I tab quite a fair amount, so I didn't enjoy it as much as I had hoped. Dark academia is not my strongest vibe either in reading, so that could have knocked the score down. I do think this got a respectable 3 stars, and for a month that has 3 stars as the lowest rating, I class it as a good month. So for the month of January, I read a total of 14 books, and the overall rating was 3.8, so not too bad to have the lowest book as a 3-star. For February, I read this as an ARC before it came out. This is The Last Tale of the Flower Bride by 𝓤𝓲𝓭𝓮𝓻. I'm really sorry if I'm saying that incorrect. First off, this cover is absolutely stunning. And the second thing I want to say about this book is it is not what I would normally read at all. I don't read gothic horror or well, don't read it very often. I think I can only think of one other book on my shelf that is classed as a gothic fantasy, and that is Belladonna by Adeline Grace. But this one is such a, how to put it, I think for me the reason why I gave this 5 stars is despite it not being a book for me and a storyline for me, I was so hooked on the fact that this book covers like toxic relationships and obsession incredibly well over a period of time that makes you want to know what happened. There is a murder mystery element to this book, and you want to know what has happened, and whilst towards the end I kind of guessed what that was going to be, the way it gets to that point is so fascinating. It's just so jarring. It's like a train wreck. You don't want to stop looking at it even though you know it's really bad. Like, the relationship between the characters is just, wow, I can't believe these people at points. And you do feel really sorry for some of them and the actions that happen, and then other points you're just like, this is so toxic. It's done so incredibly well, and this is the author's first adult attempt of a novel, so I will definitely be looking out for more by this author. I really enjoyed the way that they wrote. So for me, the main reasons for this book was just how captivating the storyline was, how the writing style was, and how hooked I was on the fact that something like this would never be my type of read at all, and yet it had me hooked to the very last page. It's also not that long. Oh dear, my book's a little bit bent there. It is, let me see really quick without trying to show the end page, 288 pages. So it doesn't take very long to get through it, but what a ride this book is. Unfortunately, I don't have a physical copy of the book that I didn't enjoy most for February, the least liked book for February, and that was an ARC that I received from an author. I reached out after hearing the concept, which was that the characters would have this like telepathic connection despite not knowing each other. I thought it was a really fascinating idea. Straight off the bat, I knew this read was not going to be for me because there is an author's note at the start of the book. The book is called A Missing Connection by Danny McLean. And the first page goes straight into this like author's note that states that she likes the idea of, oh sorry, I shouldn't gender the author, they like the idea that in the movies and stuff you don't get all the details, you kind of have to fill in the gaps yourself, and some of the reasonings behind things that happen in the book is up for the reader's sort of interpretation. And immediately that made me hesitant because I actually think that's lazy. I don't like when authors don't give enough information for the way the foundation of their stories work, and I feel like it's an integral part to every story to have a great foundation, so everything that follows, like dialogue and reasonings behind character actions, makes sense. And without this, that is why this book suffered for me. So I can't say that the writing was like poorly done. The dialogue was okay. There wasn't like anything that really stood out and said, hey, this is a really unenjoyable book. So I did give this one 3 stars as well. So that just means okay, but it's missing something for me. And unfortunately it was missing the connection to bring the connection to life in this book for me. I just can't when there's not enough information. I spent a lot of the time while I was reading it going, but why? Where is the reasoning behind this? And then I realised halfway through that I was meant to be coming up with that reasoning to fill in those gaps, and I just got frustrated. So for March, the top book was 𝓬𝓲𝓷𝓭 by Margaret Rogerson, and I absolutely love every book by this author. So it was no surprise to me that I enjoyed this. Sorcery of Thorns is one of my favourite fantasies to date, and so I had high hopes for this, and I got more than what I expected out of this. Despite the heavy church theme to this book, because the main character grew up in a convent, this book is absolutely fantastic. It has the banter. Again, it's a bit like that when it comes to fantasy for me. If it has great banter between characters, if it has a good storyline, there's character growth, I'm there for it. And this book had it all. I actually hope that the author goes through and makes this into a series, because there's room for it to become one. But as it is, it solves all the issues that are in this world. It gives you this great insight to this fantastic character through Artemisia and her Revenant, who is the other main character in this book, I suppose, is just fantastic. I would love to learn more about Revenant. And yeah, all the vibes, absolutely love it. This is my kind of fantasy, so it was natural that I'd give this 5 stars. And now I have to wait for Margaret to write something new, because I've read all her books, and that's probably the saddest thing about having read this. So for March, the lowest rated book was 2 stars, and it is the worst book for me this year so far, and it is called Falling Hard for the Royal Guard by, oh gosh, I can't remember the author's name. Let me scroll up my list here. 𝓤𝓮𝓻. And this book is a contemporary romance set in the Tower of London. I do remember talking about this book, so I think I did start my reading updates in March. So I think the biggest thing for the reason why I didn't enjoy this one was because the main character just didn't get any better from the start for me. There's no real character development for me that was rewarding, and I felt like all the areas where she could have growth didn't eventuate, and she was allowed to get away with so many things, and there were very little consequences for her actions. I remember being really like against this female character because she was so unlikable to me. Very different from my type of way of living, and whilst I don't rate all characters like they have to be relatable to me in all the ways that I feel, I do prefer books that have character development that show signs that they are changing from where they were in the beginning, and this character for me just didn't do that, and I just felt really like she was against my morals, so I was never going to enjoy her. I also feel like the writing was very jarring in this one. I remember it goes from like a history lesson kind of thing, because it's set in the Tower of London, so there's obviously that historical aspect of it. So it's like she's giving like all this historical information out, and then the next minute it's very contemporary, and like she's getting drunk and hanging out with all these guys, and then there's no consequences the next morning when she doesn't turn up for work. Things like that really got on my nerves, and so storyline wise I wasn't the right reader for this one, and that is why I gave it 2 stars. For April, this book was my favourite, and this is the one that has rivaled the most for the top spot. It was between this one and Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies when it got to the mid-year point of what book is the top book of the year. And it is a fantastic book. This is a breath of fresh air into fantasy, and I would love to read more books like this. The characters are middle-aged, so that's already a plus. As someone in her late 30s, I totally want to read more about characters that have perhaps gone from being amazing when they were younger and having like fantastic like stories told about them, and then get to like their 40s and their knees hurt and their bodies catching up with all the things that they did when they were reckless and young, but still like it's not like a complaining story. The characters are still fantastic and doing things, they're just older and doing things differently, and this book had that for me. So not only does this have fantastic characters in it, it also has a really compelling storyline, and it's really intriguing the entire way through. I didn't get bored at any of this, I just enjoyed all of it. And I really like the fact that the author went to so much depth in like researching before writing this book. I think it's set in the 12th century or the 11th century, one of them. And it's just fantastic, the amount of detail and how you can envision where this fit into like that world at that time. If you have a little bit of knowledge about that time period, it makes sense. It feels like this could have happened. Another interesting fact that I'm finding between the two favourite books of the year, this one and Emily Wilde, is that Emily is a journal, like I said, journal entries, and this one is actually an interview. So whilst we're getting the storyline, it's actually Amina telling her adventures and everything that she went through and scribing it. There's a scribe writing it all down. So like I think this is a fantastic way of representing a storyline, and I think it's really interesting that my top two picks are that, because it's just a really different way of writing a story. I think that really is working in the moment for fantasy. And the lowest rating book for April is Sally Thorne's Angelica Frankenstein Makes Her Match. Now, this one was a real letdown for me because I had high hopes for it. I know Sally Thorne is one of those writers you either love or hate, and I find her quirkiness, if I'm reading it at the right time, to be great, and then can be a bit weird when you think about it. If you spend too much time thinking about stories by this author, you'll find fault. So you have to really be in the mood to read her books. And I was definitely ready for this. This follows a character who I thought would be really fun. It's like a different play on the whole Frankenstein, Mary Shelley storyline. I really thought it was going to be great fun. This did not hit the spot. I was expecting this to be more historical romance, and whilst it is set in a historical element or time period, it's very contemporary in the way that they speak, and the characters, the main character in this, Angelica, is incredibly horny. And so if you're wanting just a really naughty romp, I guess this would please people, but I just really can't see how. I tried so hard to enjoy this, and there were elements that made me laugh, but overall I just spent my time going, what am I reading? Like, why is this so bad? The quirkiness that usually comes from this author didn't hit right in this one. It just felt really like cringe. And the fact that the female character, the main character, was always so needy for this, she really wanted, I think his name's Will in the book, the main male character, she really wanted him to like her and want to jump her bones and get married and have kids and all this stuff. Yeah, it was weird how she was really, really into that and wanted that so bad that she didn't have the right mannerisms to come across as anything but vapid, and she's really cruel. So there's no real there is some character development, but there wasn't enough for me to feel like this book had any merit for what was trying to be achieved. So I gave it 2.5 stars. So for May, the top read was Mixed Signals by B.K. Borison, and I'm so gutted that I haven't yet been able to pick up the physical copy, so it'd be perfect right now to have on the screen. They are in stock now, I think, in my city. But this is a really delightful read. This was book 3 in the 𝓬𝓷 series, and I started the series with giving it a 4, then a 4.5, and then so this one becoming a 5 was just like the icing on the cake. This one had the right amount of steam, the right amount of emotional connection, banter, angst, all that I love in a romance, and that is why this was the top read for May. I also read a lot more romances in May than I have in other months. Like the ratio is romance heavy, so that could signify why this was the top read, or it just is because it was so fantastic. I absolutely love the characters, love everything about this world. It's just so wholesome, but every book seems to get better and better. And also I find that I spent a lot more time with my mouth ajar at what was happening in the spicy scenes. I just feel like when the world's so wholesome and then you flip into this like really spicy smut scene, it just throws you off. I am listening to these books, so I haven't read the physical copy, so maybe they hit differently, but when you're listening to it, it's an experience, let me just put it that way. So I really enjoyed this book, and I cannot wait for book 4 in this series. For me, the writing, the contrast between the wholesomeness and the level of romance, and also like we're now in an established world. I know what to expect from like the world and the little coziness of it all. I feel like these characters have now become friends, and it just feels really easy to get lost in this world. So that is the reasons why I gave it 5 stars. The least liked book of May was Just Not That Into Billionaires by Annika Martin, or Anika Martin. I hope I'm saying that right. This book for me was just filling a prompt. So I had in the TBR jar game pulled a J, and the book had to start with J, and I went through several books looking for something to get connected to that started with J. Wasn't enjoying any of them, so at the point that I was at, this one was was quite a short book, and I thought I would just read it and get it over and done with. So I already knew that this book wasn't going to get a fair shot because I wasn't in the right mood, I think, for it. But even so, this is not the type of book that I would read normally. I think I would have DNF'd this if I wasn't so desperate to fill in the prompt. And that just goes to show how weird I can be. I don't even think weird's the right word. When I want to like complete something and tick off all the lists, I will do whatever it is to try and do that, and that is a downfall because I don't think we should be reading books we're not enjoying. So anyway, long story short, this book was not for me. The writing style isn't for me. The humour was just okay. This is a contemporary romance between two people, second chance romance, and I didn't feel like either of them had the right foundation to even attempt the second chance romance. I actually found them quite toxic, and I did feel a little bit for the main male character, but again, the overall story wasn't really for me. So that's just why I gave it 2.5 stars. I did try to like it, but it just wasn't my normal read. Ironically, I didn't realise when I started it that it was part of a series. I think it's like book 6 or 5, so perhaps that's also another reason why I didn't get into it, because the characters perhaps were already more established than say book 1, and I wasn't going to get that information that far into the book. So yeah. For June, it is the first month where I do not have a 5-star read. I did have a 4.5-star read though, and in June I only read 8 books, so It was a very challenging month for me as is, and it was actually really hard to choose which book was going to be the top, because there were 2 books in June that actually there were 3 books in June that I gave 4.5 stars to, and I absolutely enjoyed all 3 of them. But for me, in the end, I did choose The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston, and I think I would class this as a contemporary romance. It does have a fantasy element to it, where the apartment that the setting of this book is in is magical and has a time traveling aspect to it, but other than that, it's contemporary romance. And I really enjoy the way that this writer brings romances to the table in a different, unconventional way, and still makes it worthwhile reading. There's still all the great things that I love in a romance: the emotional connection, the balance between spiciness and intimacy, being more connected through like talking to each other and stuff like that, emotional connection. The banter's great. You know, all those types of things. I think I sound very repetitive. I'm really pleased if there's good banter, good connection, and a little bit of spice, but doesn't need to be like over the top. I don't care if there's no spice, if the tension and banter's there. However, the reason I didn't give this 5 stars was I did feel like the insta-love aspect was slightly going to be a problem for me. There are a couple of moments where I think, wow, that's a little bit fast moving, but overall it didn't affect the read for me, and I did feel the very end of the book there could have been a little less dragging out of the last obstacles. Otherwise, fantastic read, highly recommend it. I really liked her first adult romance book, The Dead Romantic, so I knew that I was going to like this, and I did. I enjoyed this one more, and I ironically sent a copy of this to my friend, but I don't have a copy of it, so I kind of need to get one because I really do enjoy this book. And the least liked book for June was My Roommate is a Vampire by Jenna Levin, one of those. This is coming out soon. I read this as an ARC, and it is a shorter book, but I did not quite grasp the concept behind this one. So this one is kind of on the fence of being a paranormal romance. Well, it is that really, but it's more contemporary romance than it is paranormal in my opinion. And the reason why I gave this such a low score, I think I gave it 2.5. Yes, I gave it 2.5 stars. The reason I didn't enjoy it so much is the main storyline around the main male character being a vampire didn't work for me. I'd much preferred if the author had gone with man has been asleep for 100 years and wakes up, rather than vampire is asleep for 100 years and wakes up. There was no real like he's a vampire kind of thing, aside from the fact that he drank blood, and I was expecting more of a vampire storyline considering the title and the synopsis, and it didn't feel that way at all to me. I also hated the way that the main angsty obstacle between the two main characters and him being a vampire was resolved. In fact, it felt like it wasn't resolved at all. It's just like the author told us how it was resolved rather than showed us. It was all very anticlimactic. And the ending had a trope that I don't enjoy. So, you win some, you lose some. Didn't enjoy this one. And the last month we're looking at is July. And for July, the top read was The Siren of Sussex by Mimi Matthews. This is book 1 in the Bells of London series. I started last month. I've talked about this very recently, so I do apologise if you're watching this and heard all about them. But you already know that I really liked this series. It follows equestrians. I have horses, so I'm already going to be hooked on something that's going to have horses. It's set in Victorian England. and it has a focus on fashion, on really interesting themes that relate to that time period, like spiritualism and how that was like coming into the forefront between the peerage, and how they were like trying to talk to the dead and stuff, and then like because of colonization, how that affects people and who are born to British, like a British father, but are from another country. Where do they fit in? Love these types of themes, and that's one of the main reasons I enjoyed this book, was the fact that the author managed to balance a romance, a convincing romance, and still had these themes and still had a focus on what would be happening in that time period, and made it really quite accurate despite the fact that this is fictional. I really enjoyed that, and I like the romance. It was really sweet. Ahmed and Evie are just a delight, and she is a blue stocking and he is a tailor trying to make his mark, and is obviously a person of colour, and there's just so much that happens in this book. It's really fantastic. Again, I read this via audiobook, so I wonder if it would hit differently if I read it in another format, but listening to it was fantastic. The narrators were perfect, and really enjoyed this one. It was actually a tight call because I also had book 2 in July that I read that was also a 5-star read, and it was between the two of them, so either one was really good. And I liked the focus of the horses and the equestrian side of it because it was very, very good. The least liked book for July was How to Get a Girlfriend When You're a Terrifying Monster by Marie. I keep saying Mary, as Marie Kondo. This book is a novella. I picked it up to read, again, a prompt, the shortest book. It has to be a book under 300 pages, and I just grabbed the smallest book on my Kindle, the first one that I found. I actually went through 2 others. It seems very similar to that Just Not Into Billionaires book, where I went through a couple of books first, didn't like them, DNF'd them really quick, took them off my Kindle. They were from Stuff Your Kindle days, so this was one of them, and it started out okay. I was laughing a little bit. I thought it was really delightful. The main character is essentially a fragment, like of a bigger specimen, and gets its own memories, feelings, and morphs itself to try and look like it's human, but it's obviously not. And I thought that was really wholesome, but completely lost me when we get the second point of view with the human. And this is supposed to be a sapphic read, and I don't know where the author was taking it. I just feel like this one was too short for anything to be really resolved and make sense. It was like the author was trying to condense too much information into such a small space, and it wasn't working. So there wasn't enough foundation there to build anything for me to enjoy. So that is the entirety of this video. I'm going to try and finish doing this kind of video again in the future, so hopefully from August to the end of the year I'll be able to do the rest. I was going to do it just till June, but I figured that would go until July, and like I said at the start of the video, I really want to do a video about some of the 4.5-star reads I've had this year and why they weren't 5s. Fourth Wing is one of those, and I really want to talk about it. So if that would be something that you'd be interested in, please let me know in the comments below, and I'll be happy to film it. I will be back with a new video sometime very soon. I actually think it'll be my September setup. So, oh no, it'll be the mid-month reading update. So if you're interested in hearing more about books, I'll see you soon. Otherwise, I'll see you in another video, hopefully. Bye everyone.